Hello and welcome back, and it's time for another Should You Buy, and this time we're looking at this, the Terramaster F4-424 Pro. Colour me impressed, but this is one of the most impressive systems the budget brand in the world of NAS has rolled out, and although we've done a full-length review, we went into the hardware, the software, the architecture, the pros, the cons and more. This is the short form version. This is where I give you 5 reasons why you might want to consider the 424 Pro NAS perfect for your data storage needs, and 5 reasons or you might want to sit on the fence just a wee bit longer until something better comes along. So let's not waste any more of your time with this intro. Let's crack on with number 1.
So you come crawling back, you cheap sack of shit.
Straight out of the gate, to say this has got design improvements over its predecessor is not even telling a quarter of the story. This new chassis here involves better trays, better ventilation, better overall layout of the components and better access to it. Now, here on my left is the F4-423. This is the Intel N5105 base version, and I'll say right now, I've always been critical of its design. Notwithstanding the plastic trays there, which again is a functional device but it always looked dated, all of the components have always felt very clunky and a little bit old hat. The trays themselves are click and load, which is fantastic with the screw holes, but in the newer device here we have much more streamlined inserts of these trays. Also, the trays feel a great deal better there overall with regards to installing there. There's still no locking mechanism there for the individual trays, but they're still absolutely fine. Also, ventilation, the predecessor there had a minimal amount of ventilation based around each of those individual trays. You had base level ventilation there, but you had no ventilation all the way along. The outside of the chassis was plastic apart from the metal on the bottom, and those 2 fans there on the rear clunked out sideways there were kind of an odd form factor overall, and even accessing the entire contents of this, getting to the motherboard to upgrade the memory, insert M2 NVMe's, all of that involved taking apart 6 screws here on the rear, removing the fan module, disconnecting the individual fans, then sliding out the internal mechanics to access a motherboard where the memory slot and the M2 NVMe slots were incredibly difficult to access, and I was highly critical of that at the time. Now, the new design on the F4-424 Pro, and indeed the 424 standard as well, and the I believe the 424 F2 version there, naming strategy not great. I will say on this, it has definitely borrowed design elements from the likes of Synology and QNAP. Definitely, they've looked at what these guys have done, seen what worked, where the industry is going and the design, and they've most certainly gone, that'll work for us. Now, what do I mean by that? Firstly, you've got the same kind of similar level of ventilation there on the front. It's a lot more flush. On the side, you have a ventilated Terramaster logo panel on each to work alongside the active ventilation, that passive ventilation. You've still got ventilation there under each of the individual drives. And the rear fan has now gone from those 2 clunky fans there on the rear that stuck outwards to a much more streamlined single fan there on the rear. And that single fan, obviously all of the fans there, you can increase or decrease the vents, but it's the fact that it's not that chunky module outside. And better still, if you want to access the insides of this device, then all you need to do is remove 2 screws here on the rear, and you access the full side panel there. I'm sure there's something on screen right now, and it just reveals the memory slot, the M2 NVMe's, just by removing that one side panel that comes off, just 2 screws to access it there. And overall, when it comes to improvements in the design, I simply cannot fault the sheer number of improvements over its predecessor in terms of aesthetic design, access, ventilation, and just general overall improvements over the predecessor.
So you come crawling back, you cheap sack of shit.
Of course, that processor, the N300 CPU inside this is the first turnkey NAS I've seen in the market right now with that processor, and it's definitely challenging the fully featured kind of prosumer middle ground normally afforded to the likes of Synology and QNAP in terms of the hardware they're presenting. These have really drawn the line exceptionally high in terms of the benchmark for what you get for that money. To put it into perspective, that i3 N300 processor there, which is an 8-core, 8-thread processor with a 1.8 GHz base speed that could be clocked up to 3.8 when needed, not only has integrated graphics that surpass 1.3, 1.4 gigahertz, graphical integrated performance internally, which again means for transcoding, graphical manipulation of any kind, you're going to get some great numbers. But on top of that, it arrives with a 7-watt TDP, which again is exceptionally low for the kind of hardware we're talking about here. To put that into perspective, as mentioned, Synology are rocking out the gate either with a dual-core embedded Ryzen processor in the 923 Plus, or a frankly very ancient J4125 Celeron quad-core processor in the DS423. So QNAP have gone a little better with the M5105 processor right now, which is still a quad-core Celeron. But given this device rocking out the gate with a $699 to $799 price point there, again it is meant to be a pro device, we'll get onto that more later on, I'd say that CPU on its own challenges those guys quite significantly. And then you find out it rocks out the gate with 32 gig of DDR5 memory. You simply cannot fault the base level hardware that this middle ground device in the grand scheme of NAS servers is arriving with is genuinely groundbreaking at the start of 2024.
So you come crawling back, you cheap sack of
TOS, or Terramaster operating system, currently in version 5.1 with TOS 6 around the corner, is better than it's ever been. I'm not going to say it's as good as the likes of Synology's DSM or QNAP's QTS or QUTS system. Those brands spend a great deal more of their budget that they get from these systems on the software. Where with the Terramaster system, I would argue a lot more of that money goes on the hardware than it does on the software. But that doesn't mean they slack, and the software platform itself is still containing of all of the basic and I would argue mid-level features that you're going to want. They have multi-site backup operation software as well, running on BTRFS. They have a flexible RAID storage system in T-RAID, much like Synology Hybrid RAID. And alongside that support of ext4 and BTRFS, as mentioned there is also the support of that multi-tiered backup storage option and synchronization between client devices, between mixed file system operating systems, and NAS to NAS backups as well, even NAS to cloud backups. They've got multimedia localized streaming apps there. They don't really have anything like a dedicated video station or dedicated music station app, but they do have an AI-powered photo recognition tool for people, things, objects, and more. They're working on a beta surveillance application, which is still early days at the moment, but at least they're doing it. And alongside that, a multitude of other applications and services, although are not the AAAA plus apps, they're focusing on the fundamentals and giving a fewer range of applications and still doing a very good job of them. And when there are gaps in their portfolio for the applications and services, such as, for example, virtual machine use, they do take advantage of third-party applications such as VirtualBox to host those apps, or using third-party container applications as well. Again, TOS, it's not the best NAS software in the market, but for the price tag and the hardware you're getting, and to fit all of that into that price tag, I still think it's worthy of recognition. And in the few things where it really does excel at, it genuinely does a fantastic job of creating a simple, easy, user-friendly user interface accessible via your web browser and their mobile application as well.
So you come crawling back, you cheap sack of...
Earlier on I mentioned about the internal components on this that can be upgraded, such as that, again, the available sodium slot there for memory, but of course there is these two M2 NVMe slots there that allow you to install NVMe SSD, Gen 3 SSDs to be precise, and taking advantage of these in there, these much faster SSDs than traditional storage drives, are always going to be advantageous. Now, Terramaster are not the only brand out there doing this, so why exactly am I giving them any kind of credence about the storage and any kind of advantage here? Why is it in the Pro? Well, a couple of reasons. Number one, the M2 NVMe's you install inside here, they're not compatibility locked in any way. You can use any Gen 3 SSD or even Gen 4 or Gen 5, but they will scale down with auto negotiation, and put them inside these individual bays to be used as storage pools or as intelligent caching. You're not locked in on one or the other. Indeed, because you've got two, you can use one for write caching if you choose, or read caching, and one for a storage pool. Overall, it means that you can take advantage of those slots in a far more evolved fashion than, say, you can on a Synology, which not only allows you to use SSD storage pools only utilising Synology SSDs, no third party, but on top of that, not all of their systems actually support the use of M2 NVMe storage pools, only solutions released after 2022. Moreover, when it comes to the hard drive bays on the Terramaster system there, I've got quite wide compatibility, unlike some brands out there that have been lessening the range of compatible and supported hard drives in terms of capacity and indeed the brands themselves. On Terramaster's platform, they support up to the very latest 22 TB from Seagate and WD, and the range of supported drives is actually a great deal broader than some of the other brands out there. Overall, you have very few storage restrictions on this device to consider, and overall, I'm really happy with what we're getting here for our money.
So you come crawling back, you cheap sack of
Plex Media Server performance on this is something we've already explored in another video, which hopefully, as you watch this, should already be live, linked in the description. But I'll tell you right now, Plex Media Server performance on this is absolutely great. And if you're looking for an affordable, turnkey, off-the-shelf solution, and you want to focus primarily on Plex Media Server in 2024, this is a solid choice. Not only because it handled transcoding and converting of 4K media exceptionally well, and to the very highest files we could throw at it, bandwidth considering, but on top of that, we also got this to transcode and play back early 8K performance. And indeed, the only limitation during our testing of Plex 8K media was simply the client device that we were using to record the footage. The system wasn't the bottleneck, the client was. So if you're looking at future-proofing a very middle-of-the-road priced NAS system in terms of scale, price point, and hardware included, this is an absolutely phenomenal Plex Media Server purchase for 4K and early 8K. Now, as good as those 5 things were, let's be realistic. Not everything is great and rosy. And now I'm going to give you the 5 reasons why you might want to sit on the fence that wee bit longer.
I want to roll my eyes right now, but the doctor said if I keep doing it, my ocular muscles might spasm and eject my eyeballs.
The lack of 10 GBE on this thing is almost a crime. Seriously, I understand there's a finite number of lanes. It's an 8/9 technically lane CPU at our disposal here that has to be spread across the individual bays and connections. But nevertheless, the lack of 10 GBE on this system, given its Pro title, is super annoying, especially when you've got such a great CPU to take advantage of inside there. Now, those 2 M2 NVMe slots inside, I believe, are Gen 3 × 2. We did some digging there in the background, which is great to hear. But I think it would have been fine to give me 1 M2 NVMe slot and give me 10 GBE. Even better, give me 1 slot and get rid of those 2 2.5 gig slots and give me 1 10 GBE there. Sure, I'd lose out on a failover. Maybe I wrote one of them 1 gig. But whatever the methodology, the fact that this system not only arrives with a lack of 10 GBE, but also there is a non-Pro version of this, which rocks out the gate with the Intel N95 processor, which is still pretty darn good quad-core CPU of the same era and family, means that the Pro titling on this really only extends to that extra memory and that bumped up CPU. In every other respect, from the M2 NVMe slots to the storage bays there on the front and the 2.5 GBE, it's exactly the same. It's just a damn shame they did not rock this out the gate with that kind of hardware with a 10 gig Ethernet port. I swear there must have been a way, architecturally, to pull back and add that in other ways.
I want to roll my eyes right now, but the doctor said if I keep doing it, my ocular muscles might spasm and eject my eyeballs.
Pricing on this system, as it's early days and availability is so very, very thin right now, is a point that, although I'm going to discuss, this point may dilute and water down over time. Now, the price tag, I keep erring between $599 and $699, and that is to do with regions, price, currency exchanges, tax, and more. But nevertheless, the fact this system can still change hands for $699 or more does make it a little bit more expensive than the majority of other 4 bays in the market. Some of the 4 bays I've already discussed knock around for between $460 and about $550 without the tax, much like the number I'm talking about here. That means you're looking at a system here that has about 150 to 200 or so nicker difference. And yes, it's a better CPU. And yes, you got 32 gig of DDR5 memory. But that's really it. That's the only thing it brings in terms of hardware that the other systems I just described don't have. And rather the incremental differences to TOS and some of the features supported within it, again, the lack of 10 GBE, the scale of the system there's just little clips of wings which make that price tag for some, currently at the moment, just a little too high. And I think that price, as soon as it becomes a bit more fluid and availability is out there, and no doubt that price comes down, I think that will be better. But right now, at the time of launch, that price, it's for me just a fraction too high.
I want to roll my eyes right now, but the doctor said if I keep doing it, my ocular muscles might spasm and eject my eyeballs.
Although Terramaster kind of focus a great deal more on the hardware than the software, as is already discussed, I will say that the fact they don't have a lot of client applications for iOS, for Android, for Windows, for Mac OS and Linux can be off-putting for some. Having more tailored access to your system, you want to access video files in a very specific video fashion presented like they are in Plex Media Server, or accessing photos via a dedicated photo application which has, effective options and configuration and choices and customization in the GUI tailored towards that, again, whether you're on a desktop system or on a mobile system, can be very desirable. There is a reason that Asustor, QNAP, Synology provide a range of different applications for managing different services. As good as it is that Terramaster do provide an all-in-one mobile app, an all-in-one desktop app that does a little bit of everything, that means you've got a very diluted experience that doesn't really do any one thing spectacularly well. It just does everything reasonably well. And again, there are going to be users that will prefer that, having one portal entry point rather than many. But I also know that there are many other users on the other side of that particular seesaw.
I want to roll my eyes right now, but the doctor said if I keep doing it, my ocular muscles might spasm and eject my eyeballs.
This next point, again, is one that I think a few of you are going to think I'm being something of a worrywart, but I do think it's worth touching on. I'm not sure how I feel about the whole 32 gig memory thing on this. Now let me explain. The N300 i3 CPU inside here, head over to Intel's own website, they detail that the maximum memory supported, they say, for stability is 16 gig. Nevertheless, Terramaster have rolled this out the gate with a single 32 gig module, not even two SODIMMs. It's a single lane there, presumably for a single channel there being used. Now, the result is, I'm not sure this system is going to, in practice, be able to use those 32 gig in a typical fashion. Now, Terramaster, I've reached out to them. They've stated, one, that they have tested it and you can use all 32 gig, and two, as long as you use their own modules, which may be something to do with the hardware backend, but we'll have to take the word for it, it means that you can take advantage of the 32 gig in this 32 gig system, despite the CPU manufacturer stating 16 gig maximum there. So, although they've said that, and we have asked them, and fair play to them, they did respond and detail their position on this, I'm still not in love with the idea of a system that comes off the shelf exceeding the manufacturer's memory. I've done plenty of videos where I've shown people upgrading Synology, QNAPs, and even Terramasters, installing memory that surpasses that of the official supported maximum stable memory. But when I've done that, it's been an optional extra that people can choose to do. Some people want to exceed the maximum supported stable memory limit. But the fact this rocks out the gate with it, I'm not sure how I feel about that.
I want to roll my eyes right now, but the doctor said if I keep doing it, my ocular muscles might spasm and eject my eyeballs.
Long-term followers of this channel and the subject of NAS will know that Terramaster was one of several brands that was impacted a year and a half ago, close to 2 years now, by the Deadbolt ransomware attack. They were targeted by the Deadbolt group successfully, I might add, and users did lose data. Now, again, they were not the only ones impacted by this. QNAP were impacted by it, as were Asustor, along with a lot of other third parties, along with other distinguished and non-distinguished, more likely, ransomware and malware groups over the years. Hell, Synology, back in 2013-14, were hit by Synology, a malware, Trojan malware that attacked a lot of their systems, resulting in locked up systems and lost data. So why am I bringing it up? Well, a few reasons. Number one, not enough time has gone by, and I think it's very important that when malware attacks network storage devices, and when there is shared responsibility, key word there, shared, between the users that have the system maintaining their security protocol and updates and the system provider maintaining the security and stability of their systems. And I think a good 5 to 7 years should be the relevant amount of time before we can let a brand off the hook. And right now, it's just been too close for me to not at least highlight that they were targeted by the Deadbolt ransomware group. Now, they did improve the kernel and the GUI and the security defaults of their system afterwards. They even added the isolation mode, one of the few brands to do so, a one-click option that disables a lot of remote access PHP protocol, third-party applications, or remote access, and requires the system to be rebooted locally in order to disable. So you've got that great kill switch for security if needed. But still, nonetheless, I do think it's important for those considering the system to be aware that there was a rather large-scale ransomware hit on this brand alongside others, and I thought it would be relevant to bring up. But apart from that, this has been a should you buy for the Terramaster F4-424 Pro. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Again, remember, there's a full detailed review, no doubt linked to the right hand side of the screen, that we already recorded along with the Plex testing we mentioned, and it also deep dives into TOS as well, and some of the software options. Do check that out. There's a written review linked in the description along with links to where you can buy this system. And again, if you use those links, it does result in a small fee coming to here on the NASCompares. Me and Eddie run this channel, which is just us, and using those links allows us to keep doing this. Apart from that, if you need more free advice, use the free advice section on the right hand side of every page at NASCompares. Alternatively, you can use our Discord or ask.nascompares forum. Alternatively, head over to Ko-Fi or Coffee or Patreon, not only to join our members circle for early access to content and access to the monthly Zooms and polls, but if you do need expedited support or want to set up a Zoom consultation to help you with your setup, those options are available to you there. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.